Hi there, my name is Phil Anderson and I'm running for United States Senate to represent Wisconsin. Happy Labor Day, everybody. And so, because it's Labor Day, I'm going to talk a little bit about labor. First of all, regarding labor unions. People have the right to assemble and to associate and to do whatever they want with their contracts and their relationships or whatever they want. So, for me and for what I would believe to be most libertarians, if not all libertarians, labor unions are absolutely fine. And not only that, but I'm not in favor of right-to-work laws, because I think that if an employer wants to have a closed shop in terms of people, if they want to work there, have to belong to the union, that's his choice. There's a free market for labor. There's a free market for everything. So if people want to belong to a union and they want to work at a certain place, and both of those things are okay with them, they should be allowed to do that. Unions perform some very important functions in the labor market, in the employment market. Quite often they administrate benefits, which is an important thing. If a company that's hiring people doesn't want to do that or doesn't have the capability of doing that, then having the union administer those benefits is very, very helpful. They also do things like training, which is also very useful. If a company is small or for whatever reason can't or doesn't find it financially viable to train people to perform jobs at their business, then having unions do that is a fabulous thing, and of course they pay for that as well. They negotiate with that union, and the union on behalf of its members negotiates working conditions and wages and those sorts of things. So it's a fair trade if the employer wants to do that, and if the employees who want to work there are willing to join the union. That's an open market. That's a free market. People should be allowed to associate with whom they want, form contracts. That goes for not only individuals with unions, but also with employers in deciding how they're going to run the labor part of what they're producing, or the goods or services that they're providing. So yeah, free market for that. But another important thing I think too is that there's sort of a false, sadly I think, a false opposition of labor and capital. Maybe it's because Marxism has sort of crept into our thinking over the course of the last 150 years, and the fact that there have been abuses between employers and employees, and there hasn't been a free market for employment. A lot of times that's manipulated by governments or just companies that employ people do a very poor job, and there's not an open enough market for employment, so those abuses get tolerated rather than adjudicated and taken care of. But the fact is that the capital without labor is useless. Capital, whether it's a machine or a building or minerals in the ground, gold or whatever it might be, is useless without labor to put it to work. That's a basic foundation of any economic system. Maybe even especially that Austrian economics and a libertarian economics, in that we have this idea of homesteading, and that the way that you can acquire capital, especially in terms of land, is to go out and apply some labor to it, change it, make it yours, and then you can own it. That's called homesteading. So I think it's a very important part of the labor-capital equation in libertarianism and Austrian economics, that we acknowledge that capital without labor, it's not worthless because it can sit and be invested, but at some point it needs to be turned into something useful or traded for something, so there's going to be labor involved. But on the other hand, labor without capital, it's not useless, but it leads us back to a subsistence economy. For thousands and thousands of years, people had to work their own land and use the same sort of technology, the shovel and the pick and the wheel and the cow and the mule or whatever, those sorts of things, to leverage their own labor and to create value. And it was backbreaking work, and it took a long time, and it didn't create enough value for people to get ahead and save money and do the sorts of things that people do as a matter of course now. It wasn't until capital was invested in the labor, where we had machines that could multiply the amount of wealth that a laborer could create. And that's actually what happened in the early 20th century, whereas the assembly line and other different ways of mechanizing labor and putting tools in workers' hands that would multiply the wealth that they're creating with their labor, that allowed companies to scale back to allow workers to only work a 40-hour work week and other things. It also reduced child labor. A lot of those things came into effect about the same time, but actually a little bit before labor laws came into effect in the 1930s. So it wasn't just a question of progressives or Democrats or whoever fighting back the need for greedy capitalists to exploit their workers. No, that wasn't really the case. It was more a case of the equipment and the capital that was being placed in the hands of skilled laborers to create enough wealth so that they didn't have to work that long, and it wasn't really necessary in order for people to be able to run their household, to have enough money to get by for their family, for everyone to work, but mom, dad, kids, whatever. It just wasn't that way anymore. So labor needs capital to a certain extent, otherwise we go back to a subsistence economy, and I don't think most people want that. So on this Labor Day, I'd like to, again, extend my congratulations to everyone who works for a living, which is almost everyone, obviously, including me. Labor is very, very important. It shouldn't be disrespected at all. It's essential, as a matter of fact, to our economy. But let's not, put labor in opposition to capital, which leverages that labor and helps people just do all that much better in terms of providing for their families and for their future. So that's all I have. It was a little convoluted tonight, and I'm chasing bugs in the garage. But happy Labor Day to everyone, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.